Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast. I am Patrick Brown. I am joined by Ryan Callahan. We are a little more than 48 hours out from Tennessee's big football game against Oklahoma on Saturday night at Neyland Stadium. I am excited for this one, a first and finally a night home game for Tennessee. The dark mode uniforms will be out. The fans, I'm sure, will be electric. It'll be a great atmosphere, great light show. Question is, will the game be great for Tennessee? We will discuss that in depth here on this podcast. And Ryan, what are your how's your week going so far?
Good. It's getting a little chilly. I'm up here. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm up here in section double L. It looks like it's getting a little drafty up here. But Saturday night, it won't be warm, but it should be fun. But yeah, no, it's week's going well, but it's sort of as I try to look at this game, sort of take more of an in-depth look throughout the week. It's hard to get a feel for what's going to happen here, because you got two teams that in some ways both have some real issues, and it's hard to say which ones are more glaring going into this one. So sort of an interesting game to break down with a lot at stake for both teams.
Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, this is the best way. I wanted to get everyone ready for Saturday night with a photo of Neyland at night. Normally we have a day running through the T photo for our podcast background, but I wanted to get everyone in the mood and get everyone excited for Saturday night and all the lights and the fireworks and the pyrotechnics and all of that. So I found one from the last dark mode game, which would have been Kentucky from last season, but I didn't want to have most of it blocked out. So we just have little circles around our head. It looks like we're floating, as Ryan said, in section whatever. But we're just having fun here. So, but we're going to get right into it. We're going to talk about Wednesday night's SEC availability report, as we usually do on the Thursday podcast. We will talk about what's going on with Tennessee's defense and is there a fix imminent? And then we will talk about this game with Oklahoma, which, Ryan, I think is a pretty clear-cut college football playoff elimination game. Both of these teams have 2 losses. You look at Oklahoma, I mean, they could lose this game, and then if they won out, they would potentially have a couple more ranked wins on the resume. They go to Alabama after an open date, and then they host Missouri and then host LSU, which now is with an interim coach. So, I mean, theoretically, Oklahoma could lose this game and maybe still backdoor their way in. We haven't seen a 9-3 SEC team get into the 12-team playoff yet. So maybe one day that'll happen. Maybe it'll happen next year when the league goes to 9 conference games. But it seems like a pretty tall task. You would have to be probably about the 6th SEC team. League's probably not going to get 6. Maybe it should. That's a different conversation. And certainly for Tennessee, if you lose this game, you really only have one more opportunity for a ranked win. That would be at the end of the season against Vanderbilt, assuming Vanderbilt doesn't continues to win, as crazy as that sounds. But so this is obviously a very important game for both teams. And if you're Tennessee, there's a chance for you to set up November to where you can go play New Mexico State as a tune-up for your last 2 games, which if you win this one on Saturday night, certainly will have plenty on the line. Tennessee will have, it appears Colton Hood will be available for that game. He was not on the availability report. We had heard optimism early in the week, Ryan, after he suffered a calf injury, didn't finish the Kentucky game, but we'll see. Again, there's a couple more injury reports, but him not being on the first one of Wednesday night would suggest that he is going to be good to go for this game.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, it's maybe not a huge surprise that he was left off the injury report. It doesn't sound like it was a very serious calf injury. So I don't know if you would consider it a strain. I think just more of a slight pull of the calf muscle, not a serious thing. So a week of treatment, and I think he's been walking around fine, no problem. Not sure if he's been full go in practice all week or if he's needed to rest it, but it definitely doesn't sound like anything that's going to seriously endanger his availability going into the game. It's just the kind of thing that you hope he doesn't re-aggravate, at some point during the game on a cold night. But yeah, either way, not a lot of concern about him based on the fact that he's not even on the injury report to start. And then it's obviously big news for Tennessee. You don't get Jermod McCoy back in this game, it looks like. So you definitely needed Hood to be out there. If he had for some reason missed this game, that could have been a big blow for Tennessee, with the cornerback depth not being great, with Ty Redmond, kind of getting picked on here and there at times. You wouldn't have been feeling as good about that corner situation without Colton Hood. With him in there, you feel a little bit better about things, even though the secondary has given up some plays pretty consistently. Even with him, it just would not have been a good situation to have a guy like him, who's been clearly your best defensive back all season, out for a game like this.
The other players on the injury report Arion Carter, who did not play against Kentucky as he's dealing with double turf toe, is questionable. And then 3 players ruled out. Ryan touched on one, Jermod McCoy, obviously Ricky Gibson, a long-term injury there. And then Travis Smith will miss a 4th straight game, I believe. So they get Radarius Jackson back last week. They get Ethan Davis back last week. Both those guys help in the win against Kentucky. Will they get Arion Carter back? Double turf toe, cold weather game doesn't sound like a great combination, and seems like he's probably the definition of questionable, Ryan.
I would say he's very questionable for this game. Certainly not looking very good in terms of his chances of being able to suit up for this game. We've touched on it since at least last week, but turf toe in each of his feet. That's a problematic injury. It's tough enough to play through one of those, and it's the type of injury that only really gets better when you're able to rest it. So. If he somehow gutted it out for this game, he would be well below 100%. You probably wouldn't get a ton of snaps out of him. So I think the sounds like the more prudent course of action for Tennessee and for Arion Carter in this game is for him to sit out. You've got an open date next week. That'll buy him at least 2 more weeks of rest before he would have to get on the field, leading up to the New Mexico State game. So it certainly makes more sense for him to sit out this game, and he could even potentially sit out the New Mexico State game to get ready for Florida, and you could really buy him some rest. So we'll see, how soon he's able to get back out on the field. But certainly, even though that questionable tag is there, I would say he's more on the doubtful side of questionable as opposed to the probable side.
And we'll see again how the next 2 nights, Thursday night and Friday night, the injury reports come out. Hopefully I'm done with trick-or-treating by 8:10 Eastern on Friday night so I can get to that one. But Arion Carter was listed as questionable all 3 nights last week. Did make the trip. He was listed as a game-time decision in pregame, but and did go through stretch and warm-up. He was at the back of the line of linebackers, and we were kind of told it was going to be emergency only, and they didn't end up needing him. So we'll see what the case is. But, yeah, I mean, turf toe on both feet just sounds painful. Well, actually, as you touched on, Ryan, last week, the label turf toe doesn't make it sound like it's bad, but it's hard to play football through that injury. Not that I have any experience to speak of, but we will also touch on Jermod McCoy because he's listed as out, but we have both heard that and we have shared this on the checkerboard as well, that he has increased his involvement in practice here recently, and potentially he's not going to come back this game. He's already been ruled out. So the next opportunity would be New Mexico State, but that potentially would give him even more of a chance to sort of ramp up. Maybe you could even play him a little bit in that game if that's how it falls, and then maybe play the net last 2 games. But we've seen a lot of, he's not going to play again this year. He's done. The next time we see him will be in the NFL. And I think you and I, Ryan, have both said that we're still not ready to say that. We still haven't closed the door on that, and it does seem like there's been some movement towards him getting back on the field at some point this season. I will add, I do think it would help Tennessee's case of getting him back if they win this game on Saturday night.
Yeah, as we've kind of touched on throughout the process, this is a multifaceted decision and approach to getting a guy like that back on the field coming off an ACL tear. You've got other people involved in the decision. It's not been just about what Jermod McCoy wants to do. It's not been just about what the trainers at Tennessee think. So you've got things to consider beyond just whether he's fully healthy. And obviously one of those is the fact that he's still getting some first-round draft projections without having played a game this season. So it's a complicated thought process, but at the same time, I think he has really wanted to play, and I think he really is interested in being out there for his team and getting out there and being part of a team that can maybe play its way into the college football playoff again. And as you said, that that possibility is alive if you win this game. If not, then maybe part of that drive to get back out there is not as front of mind, and you're more focused on the draft possibilities, knowing that this team's probably not going to be in the college football playoff if they lose this game. So, how this all plays out is sort of fascinating, but it goes back to at least, I guess the first time I heard it was maybe a month ago that Jermod McCoy might be back in time for the final few games of the regular season, even if he was not able to return in time for the Alabama game. And sure enough, here we are, and it looks like there's a chance he could play the final few games of the regular season. So we'll see if that's how it plays out. But the fact that he was, he's on the practice field last week, from what I was told, became more involved this week. It sounds like he got more into team drills and has been in pads and ramping up his level of activity. So Even though he's been listed as out on the initial availability report, it does sound pretty encouraging that things are moving in that direction. We kind of thought that's what it would be before he got back out there, that it wouldn't just be, popping up on the sideline Saturday without practicing, that he was going to ramp up his activity and gradually get back into it. And in New Mexico State, it might seem like an odd game to return for, but I think it would make some sense if he does that, because then, you get a chance to sort of knock off the rust in a non-conference game like that, where you're probably going to outclass your opponent. And then obviously that would get you ready for the big test against Florida, which has some really good wide receivers. And that would actually be a really good test for him against some pretty good competition to show that he's back. So you don't want that to be your first game back, maybe. And that's why I think the thought is New Mexico State would be a good game to get him out there for the first time, as opposed to, throwing him out there against Oklahoma this week.
Yeah, and I'll add, I don't think it's cut and dry that if Tennessee wins or loses, he's definitely coming back or not coming back. I don't, as you touched on, and as we've said on this podcast, there's a lot of layers to this. There's a lot of pieces, moving pieces. To borrow a favorite phrase on the checkerboard, it's fluid.
Yep.
So as there's been throughout this entire sort of situation, there's a lot of things that can change and different things going on. So it's not as simple as if Tennessee wins, Jermod will be definitely back, or if they lose, well, he's done. It's not that cut and dry, I don't think. So, but they certainly could use him back. Tennessee's defense, it's I think the best way to describe the state of Tennessee football right now is that they went and scored 56 points in an SEC road win, and all anyone can talk about is the defense. That's just the state of this team right now. You've up 34 points to Kentucky, 330 yards, 5 touchdown passes to Cutter Boley. And it's interesting going into this game, before we get too much into the preview. A few weeks ago, if Tennessee's defense was in this state, you'd be thinking, how on the earth are they going to stop John Mateer in Oklahoma? Oklahoma has not been great on offense either, dealing with some injuries on the offensive line. Their quarterback has not been the same since surgery on his thumb at the end of September. So, but for Tennessee's defense, obviously they'll be at home, which will be a big boost. You would think that in the black jerseys night game, crowd fired up, they'll be flying around, making, try to make the havoc that they've done all season happen. But what was we sort of, without going too detailed, Ryan, how do we sort of diagnose what's gone on with this defense and why? I mean, looking up the numbers here on Thursday morning, they were 7th in the country in scoring defense last season. This season, they're 112th. Now, you can get stats to say whatever you want, but I would say the best indication of how good you're on defense is how many points do you allow, and Tennessee's allowing way too many points right now. So what's gone on to it? What's gone wrong? We talked to some defensive coaches and players this week that have been trying to put a better picture on it and say, we can fix it. We've got to fix it. All these things. What do we make of the state of the defense right now and how it's gotten to this point? And what if anything, can they do to get out of it?
Yeah, it's a tricky one to assess. We've obviously been asked this question on the checkerboard a lot recently. Just what's going on? Why is it going wrong to this degree? Josh Heupel got a question about this Monday, and I think there's something to it. I think Tennessee's defense is a bit too complex, and I think that is contributing to the issues. But at the same time, I don't think Tennessee's made wholesale changes to its scheme since last year. So, yeah, how do you explain, even if that's the issue this year, why wasn't that as much of an issue last year when you had essentially a top 10 defense in a lot of major categories? So it is hard to sort of reconcile the drop off, and so I think we have to acknowledge that part of this is a talent issue to a degree, because I think you are missing some of those key players from last year. James Pierce, Omar Norman-Lott, Elijah Simmons, Amari Thomas, those were all key players on last year's team, and it certainly hurt to lose guys like that. Will Brooks on the back end, he might have been a former walk-on and might not have been an elite athlete, but he was another guy back at the back end of the defense that gave you a reliable tackler and a guy that knew where to be and did most of the right things. So, and then obviously losing your 2 cornerbacks that look like NFL prospects, and obviously Jermod McCoy is an NFL prospect, not having either of those guys out there for pretty much the whole season, with Ricky Gibson having played a little bit in the season opener before his injury, that's made a difference too. So it's been, I think there've been multiple factors in there. The pass rush has been the one exception. It's been really good at times. And that, just a couple of weeks ago, they led the SEC in sacks. Now they've slipped a little bit on that list after only having one combined sack, I think, in the last 2 games. So, there's some things that have gone better than others, but yeah, the pretty consistent issues with the pass defense, with the tackling, and just not good in zone coverage, not great in man either, but they've been better in man. But it's just kind of a consistent problem. But the one thing that I keep coming back to is it looks like players are having to think too much on the field and having to diagnose too much of what they do, both pre-snap and even after the snap, especially in the back end. Those linebackers, those safeties, they have a lot to process in this system. And so I wonder if there's a way to streamline things, because I don't think Tennessee's talent is this bad. I just don't. There's no way there's no way they should be dead last in the SEC in pass defense. There's no way they should be 15th out of 16 in the SEC and other major categories. It's just they have better talent than that, and they're not playing to that level. And I think it's for a few reasons. But basically, the simplest way to put it is I think the complexity of the defense shows up in even the tackling. For instance, you might be thinking about where you need to be, what your responsibility is on that play, up until the moment that the ball comes right in front of you, and then you're having to read and react at the last second to a play that's already kind of approaching you before you stop thinking, essentially, and just decide to make the play, if that makes sense. So as opposed to guys just knowing in man coverage, hey, this is my guy, this is where I've got to be. Safeties are often in some sort of zone coverage, and there's a lot of thought that goes into a lot of different boxes they have to check to determine where to be on any given play. And it's not unusual that in this day and age you see opposing offenses sending a lot of guys in motion, a lot of eye candy, they call it. There's a reason for that, because a lot of defenses, that changes the read of a play entirely in terms of where you might need to be and how you're going to defend a play. And you get defenses to, essentially announce what they're going to do sometimes by sending those guys in motion too. So just the thought process that goes into that, it can make guys too slow to react, and that can cause issues with tackling, and in addition to just not being in the right spot. So it's just a lot of layers to it. But I think you start with the complexity, and then there's just some times where, maybe lack of experience in some spots where you have young guys on the field, and then just the defensive line not playing as well as last year too. I think that's kind of an underrated part of this, is they're not as good up front as they were last year, which is why they're giving up the yards in the run game that they have compared to last season.
Yeah, I point to 3 things, and this is maybe not sort of delving into the why, but you look at missed tackles. Last season, Tennessee in 13 games missed 118 tackles. This is per Pro Football Focus, and a missed tackle is sort of a subjective stat, but this is just a reference. Was 118 in 13 games last season. They're already at 98 through 8 games this season. Third downs have been a big issue, and Jeremiah Telander talked about this earlier in the week, saying, hey, if we get 1 third down stop, that's 8 less plays. Well, in SEC games this year, they're giving up 46.5% conversions. That's not good enough. And then big plays. They've already allowed, 20-plus yard plays. They've allowed 39 so far this season, which is second most in the SEC. Tennessee's 15th in the SEC in a lot of categories. Shout out Arkansas for being a little bit worse. But yeah, 39 plays of 20-plus yards this season compared to 45 all of last season. So I point to those big 3 areas as numbers that sort of outline where this defense is falling short. And you made a great explanation there. I don't think it's one thing that's causing all of these things when it's gone this bad, when it's regressed this far. I don't think it's just one thing, because if it was, these coaches and players are, the coaches are paid handsomely, the players are paid now to fix it. So if they know football, so they would fix it if they could. And Rodney Garner didn't really mince words this week. He sort of took on the speaking for the entire defense. We asked a few questions about the defensive line, and he was just talking about the defense as a whole and said, hey, we're an elite program. We expect to play elite defense around here. We're not. We're working hard to try to figure out why. We got a lot of pride on this coaching staff and among this team to try to get it fixed. Talking to Jeremiah Telander, he says, watching the film, it seems like they're close or maybe one guy off. And that is the case, right? Like, you do see that a few times, but you're just seeing breakdowns. And I went back and looked at some of the problem plays from the Kentucky game in my X's and O's feature this week. And yeah, there's just guys out of position. They're just getting blocked out of position. Some of it, I would be interested to see when the staff goes back and looks at it. Okay, how many times is when a play goes wrong, are they saying, okay, this was not a great call, we didn't put our guys in a great position? How many times is it we're in a good call, but guys either aren't getting off blocks, we miss a tackle, it's just not getting executed? It's probably a little bit of both, right? So a couple plays last week, you got guys running with the pre-snap motion all the way across the field. You're asking them to cover and then maybe switch on the fly when a play gets, after the snap. And it seems like guys like Ryan, like you said, they're just a little, maybe a split second late, slow to react, something like that. Is that because they're thinking too much? At some point, does not playing well start to mess with your head a little bit, right? Like you get into a 3rd and 8 situation, you've struggled on 3rd down. You've probably been hearing it all week. Okay, we got to get a stop here. How much, when do you start pressing? I think that's probably been an issue too, because as the season builds, you get tendencies and like, you're struggling on 3rd down. The coaches have said all week, you got to get 3rd down stops. And then you almost make that moment too big and you get, that moment's a little bit big, too big for you. You're a little bit out of place and you don't make a tackle and you give up a 1st down. And then you're like, the shoulders drop. I wonder where the confidence is. Again, there's determination was sort of the tone of what we heard this week, but how much can Tennessee fix this in a week? I mean, if it's a complexity issue, can you simplify the game plan enough for a team like Oklahoma that does a lot of different things to, let your players play fast again? Or is this a 1-week fix, or is this sort of something that Tennessee's going to have to look at after the season and just get by with what they've got this year?
Yeah, it feels to me like the type of thing that's going to be hard to change a lot mid-season. And again, I think some of this is, we have to be honest, a bit of a talent problem. You've got some deficiencies personnel-wise. Boo Carter's playing a decent number of snaps at the star position. I don't think he's been very good in coverage there. That's not to say Jalen McMurray's been perfect, but I think he's been a little more reliable there lately, especially. And then you had moments where Boo Carter's been good, but probably more where he's been picked on when he's been in coverage. You've got a freshman at cornerback in Ty Redmond who's been thrown into a really tough spot. Has overall played pretty solid. He's not grading out in the 40s on PFF every week or anything like that. And you see some freshmen who do that at times. So he's been solid, but I think he's been picked on at times too. And then at safety, they've just not played very well. And again, how much of that is the mental side of the game? You've got Idris Farouk, who's starting for the first time this year. He's probably has had to learn on the job a bit more than they've maybe led on there. And there's some kind of freshman-ish mistakes he's made at times. But Andre Turrentine's not playing much better. So those guys are struggling. And again, up front, I don't think they're winning as many one-on-one battles. They're not as disruptive. And I think they've done a few things different schematically this year too. I don't want to make too much of that, but I do think there have been some adjustments at least where this is not just a completely identical defensive system compared to what they did last year. But that's pretty typical, and you install different things from 1 week to the next a lot of times too. But just, yeah, I mean, for instance, if you're a safety, you might have to keep an eye on 3 or 4 different players who might determine where you need to be on that given play. You might be watching the wide receiver over here on the outside, a wide receiver in the slot next to him, and a tight end who all could come into your part of the field. And you've got to kind of be watching all of them because of the coverage that you're playing. So there's just so many things that you have to be able to read and process quickly. And so it's not just a matter of being in the right place at the right time. It's a matter of the player being on the same page with what the defensive coordinator would like him to do in that situation. And some of that's just based on a split-second decision and your view of things after the snap or pre-snap or whatever. So just a lot of thinking that goes on. The flip side of that is, if you say simplify things, if you're too predictable, SEC teams are good enough to exploit that. So it's a catch-22. If you're not complex and you just rely on your athleticism, that can work well a lot of times, but it also makes you much more predictable and easier to pick apart and maybe exploit some mismatches. And if you're more complex, you can be too complicated for players to execute their assignments properly at a lot of times, and that can essentially get you beat on any given play if someone's not in the right place or doesn't know where they should be or they're indecisive for a moment. So just a lot of layers to that. And as a defensive coordinator, I don't know how you make wholesale changes there midstream. So it just seems like the kind of thing that you have to, maybe you make some tweaks, small things here and there to simplify things in some spots, but it seems like the kind of thing that you're gonna have to maybe reassess after the season to really do much. And you just got to kind of focus on the things you can improve each week, which is, the tackling, the fundamentals, making sure you're at least doing the right things, where when your mind's not slowing you down, you're able to make more plays.
Tennessee's defense will try to get back on track this week against Oklahoma, and this looks like the very definition of a toss-up game. I think Vegas has it as Tennessee is a 3.5-point favorite, which if you subscribe to the theory that they give that 3 points to the home team, that's virtually a pick 'em. You look at ESPN's two metrics, the Football Power Index favors Tennessee. I think they give the Vols about a 63% chance of winning this game. But the S&P Plus, which is another metric that's on ESPN, actually gives Oklahoma the slight edge. Britain predicts that Oklahoma win, just a 28-27 game. So that's obviously pretty toss-up worthy. But I think this is a fascinating game because Tennessee, it's strength on strength, right? With Tennessee's offense, top 3 in the country in scoring and total yards, against Oklahoma, that's 5th in scoring defense and total defense. Their havoc numbers are crazy. They've had 11 tackles for loss or more in 6 straight games. They had 14 last week against Ole Miss. I think they lead the country by a clear 16 or 17 TFLs. I mean, it's kind of crazy. They are very deep and very talented on the defensive line, but a little bit gettable in the secondary. They also have been starting a freshman corner. One of their top cornerbacks has been out or missed last week's game against Ole Miss, Gentry Williams, and he's questionable this week as well. And then you look at their offense. They were, John Mateer was all the rage in September when Oklahoma beat Michigan. They beat Auburn at home. He was running around making plays, being a little Baker Mayfield-ish. Then he undergoes thumb surgery and hasn't been the same since then. So Oklahoma's started 5-0. They were number 6 in the country. They lose to Texas, bounce back nicely, beat South Carolina, and then lose at home to Ole Miss in a pivotal game in the playoff race in this conference too. So what do we make? Do we feel good about Tennessee's chances? Obviously, it'll be, Tennessee's offense will have to be on point against a really disruptive defense because I believe Oklahoma, they forced like 40% 3-and-outs or something crazy like that, but they gave up a lot of big plays last week to Ole Miss. So what do we make of that matchup? And are we scared of Oklahoma's offense in its current state with a quarterback that's not playing well and an offensive line that's playing a lot of young guys because there's injuries? How are we feeling about this game for Tennessee, Ryan?
Yeah, like I said at the top, it's kind of a weird matchup because both teams have reasons to be really worried. This is one of those. If you're a golfer going into this tournament, you're both players are gripping the club a little tighter in this game because it's just nothing's going well, and you feel like you've got to be. You're going to try probably too hard to be perfect in this game because you've just got to do some things better than you have been. And there's so much at stake in this game. So, it is a tough one to decipher a little bit because there are some things on paper that make me think Oklahoma could be a little bit overrated in some areas. Their defense being so highly ranked, especially they've only given up, for instance, only 2 teams have thrown for 200 yards against them this year, and their pass defense is ranked, I think, 3rd in the country going into this game.
But they've played Michigan, Auburn, South Carolina, Texas, right? They haven't played this Tennessee offense.
Yeah, and last week they faced Ole Miss, and Ole Miss threw for 300 yards on them. And Ole Miss, obviously, is probably the SEC team that most closely resembles what Tennessee wants to do offensively, aside from maybe Mississippi State. So I think that's a better comparison for what Tennessee can expect to maybe have a chance to do in this game. Now, with that being said, what makes Brent Venables, and he's got obviously a really strong defensive background, what makes him who he is a lot of times on defense is that he's willing to throw some exotic looks at you, and you have to imagine that he's going to see on film what clearly Mississippi State and Alabama and Arkansas had seen on film, and do some things to take away the deep ball from Tennessee. So I think Tennessee's offense is going to have to work a little bit harder in this game. They're going to have to probably put together some longer drives than they're accustomed to, or make some plays after the catch, because I don't think the deep ball is going to be there as often. Or if you go to it, you may have to force it into some coverage that's less favorable or something like that. Because I would imagine Oklahoma's going to, kind of play deep and try to take that away, especially on the Chris Brazzell side of the field. And so there's going to be opportunities there, I think, for other guys to make some plays, and Tennessee's going to have to protect the quarterback well too, because Oklahoma is, I think, 3rd in the country in sacks, 29 sacks. And so to have that kind of production, that's concerning. But Tennessee's done a good job of protecting the quarterback this year. So that Oklahoma defense, I think, is the part that could be the great equalizer in this game. And that's how well Tennessee's offense translates to attacking that Oklahoma defense. I think will go a long way toward determining who wins this game, because I think Tennessee's we have a better idea of what Tennessee's defense is going to do. You have a feeling Oklahoma is going to get theirs to some degree. Now, I don't think they're going to light up Tennessee, but I think what we've seen from Tennessee's defense at this point, you got to assume Tennessee needs to score 27, 30 points at least to win the game. I mean, you're just going to have to outscore teams to some degree. The question is, how much better can Tennessee's defense get, and how much better can John Mateer get after his recent performances? Tennessee's pass rush needs to get back to what it was doing a few weeks ago. That I think we've seen a couple teams make more of a concerted effort to get the ball out quickly. Certainly Kentucky did that last week. And Tennessee's just not been quite as effective rushing the passer. I think some teams have figured out some tendencies and things like that have made them a little bit easier to defend, and they might need to adjust. So they've got to get after the quarterback this week. That's the simplest way to cause some problems for John Mateer, and you need to continue to keep him off balance, I guess, is the way to put it, because he's not been as good since he came back from his injury. Is it because of his health? Is it because he's running to tougher matchups against teams like Texas and Ole Miss? It's hard to say for sure how much it is of each one. Our guys at Sooners Illustrated, Colin Kennedy did our Q&A for Behind Enemy Lines, and he made it sound like he doesn't think the injury is still an issue for John Mateer, but there's some people who are still wondering if that's a problem. But whatever the case, he's not been as good since he came back, and Tennessee's got to make sure they don't get him right in this game by playing defense the way they have been a lot lately. They've got to get after the quarterback. That's where it starts for me, because you kind of know that secondary is gonna give up some plays. That's just sort of where they are right now. You hope that Colton Hood or someone makes a big play at some point, because that's where they thrive still in spots at making big plays. We saw the 2 turnovers last week. Farouk's interception return for a touchdown. You hope some plays like that show up, but if you don't get the turnovers, Oklahoma is probably going to get some points in this one. So you got to get after the quarterback and do a good job of generating a consistent pass rush.
Yeah, I mean, this game is strength on strength, right? The strengths are probably going to cancel each other out a little bit. Like Tennessee's probably going to hit some big plays. They're probably going to, move the ball, put up some points and yards. Oklahoma's probably going to get some stops. They're going to get some sacks. That's just what they do. And so which weakness is less weak, I guess, is the question. And I would probably say that there's probably a better chance that Mateer snaps out of his funk than Tennessee figures it out on defense. Just, I don't know if that's a negative outlook or what, but at the same time, Tennessee's playing at home. Their defensive line against Oklahoma's offensive line, I think, as it was in this game last season, was a big difference in this game. Now, Tennessee's defensive line has been neutralized a little bit. Kentucky was screen city. I think they did some things with the cadence and the clapping that had Tennessee's pass rushers kind of like second guessing. They got them off sides at least twice, and it almost was like they were not, they weren't jumping the snap. Here it's going to be so loud that you're not going to have to worry about it. They'll probably do some silent count stuff that maybe could play into Tennessee's hands. But I do think that this game for Tennessee, and it's going to come down to 2 things. I think Tennessee's offensive line has to have probably its best game of the season. You're going to need your 2 5-star tackles to play like 5-star tackles. And there's been a lot of, I guess, film out there on the social media world and stuff about David Sanders and just how well he played. And it was pretty good. I know Brooks Austin did a nice film breakdown of Tennessee's offensive line and focused a lot of it on Sanders, who in his first start looked really solid. Now, can he go against the guys that Oklahoma is going to throw at him with R. Mason Thomas is, playing at an all SEC level? They've got some interior guys. David Stone is a former 5-star, and they just roll about 8 deep without much of a drop off. So the interior guys are going to have to be good. The running backs are going to be good in cover and pass protection. Deshaun Bishop got his eyes. They had a little mix up last week that gave up a sack. So, you've got to try to stay out of 3rd and 2nd long as best you can, because that's when Venables is going to get exotic and throw different blitzes at you. Listen to Braylon Staley this week, Alec Abel, and they talked about how Tennessee's just seeing a lot of different defenses this season from week to week. Even within games, teams are changing things up. You're going to get that in this game because, Oklahoma played a little bit of that 3-down defensive line, 3 safety look against Tennessee last season. That's not necessarily their base look. there's different things that you're going to have to kind of counter when you play Tennessee. So you're going to have to play different ways throughout the game because Tennessee is so good at, if you're taking one thing away, they've got other options, right? If teams are sitting back deep, Tennessee has shown they can run the ball this season, right? If teams are playing soft on the perimeter, you can make plays over the middle. If teams are trying to take Chris Browse away, they've got Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley to throw the football to. And if you are bold enough to leave your cornerbacks on an island like Kentucky was, we saw how that turned out. So Tennessee's got a lot of different ways to beat you, but I think, Venables and this defense, they've got a lot of different ways they can probably play. So I think that'll be a fascinating chess match in this game. So Tennessee's offensive line, they have to protect Joey Aguilar, and I think they have to have enough balance running the football to where they're not in 2nd and 9 and 3rd and 8 all day.
Yeah, and to get to back to your original question, I still think this is a game Tennessee should win because it's at home. I do think playing at night at Neyland Stadium is a big deal. I don't always put a ton of stock into home field advantage at the NFL level, but in college it definitely matters, and certainly at night it really matters. In a place like Neyland Stadium, it's a big advantage. So I think this is a game Tennessee obviously they need to win it, but I think they should win it because I think their offense is consistent enough that Oklahoma knows it's got to go into this game expecting to. They've got to plan to score some points if they're going to have any chance to win. And in Tennessee, they've got a feared passing game with good reason. They showed last week against Kentucky what they're capable of doing, and Joey Aguilar was really good. He's been really good for most of the season, even though he's got 6 interceptions. As we know, a few of those really aren't on him. They've had some balls go off receivers' hands and things like that. So he's played really well and needs to in this game. It's going to, in a lot of ways, it may come down to the quarterbacks. Can Mateer get back on track, and how well can Aguilar play, and can he take what's given? Is he just going to concede that the deep ball is not there if Oklahoma does some things to take it away, or are they going to force the issue and try to make it happen anyway, thinking we've got Chris Brazel and you don't, or we've got Mike Matthews and you don't? That's a kind of an interesting subplot to me. And yeah, to your point, if Oklahoma kind of sags deep in coverage, that's going to open up some things for the run game. Can Deshaun Bishop have a big game? I think that's certainly on the table. Oklahoma's been pretty good against the run, but again, how many teams have they faced that have this kind of offense and this kind of balance that can maybe take advantage of whatever opportunities they have in the run game to be at least pretty productive? So yeah, as you said, Tennessee's offensive line is going to have to be good. So is Oklahoma's. Tennessee's pass rush, they know they've not been productive the last 2 weeks. They want to change that. They're going to be pretty motivated to do so. And you would have to imagine Tennessee is going to do what it can to get some pressure on John Mateer. And Oklahoma might be starting 2 freshman tackles, it looks like. You've got a really talented one in Michael Fasusi that's basically been starting all year. He's kind of Oklahoma's David Sanders. But then you've got another freshman that, because of an injury to a starter, you've got another, their right tackle probably won't play. Derek Simmons, I believe his name is. And so Ryan Foje, another freshman, was a backup at right guard. He made his first start at right tackle last week and played pretty well for his first start. But this is a tough assignment on the road. So if you've got 2 freshman tackles against Tennessee's defensive line, that to me, even though Fasusi's really talented and you can't assume that's one that Tennessee's going to win that matchup, you got to take advantage of that in some form or fashion. They've played in some tough environments, but for 2 freshmen to be thrown into this setting, you certainly hope Tennessee's crowd noise can make a difference with guys like that playing tackle, and that Josh Joseph and Caleb Herring and Jordan Ross can take advantage of any advantage they might have in that matchup against some freshmen who might be kind of deer in the headlights a couple times if things start to snowball in Oklahoma.
Yeah, you talked about Oklahoma's defense and the schedule. They had allowed 15 pass plays of 20-plus yards in the first 6 games, and Ole Miss hit them for 5 plays of 25-plus yards. So some big plays there, and a long touchdown run, 20-yard touchdown run as well. And now they're going against an offense that's got the SEC's number 1 passer, the SEC's number 1, number 4, number 8 receivers, and it's number 6 rusher. So a lot of things to have to counter. And looking at Mateer, his splits, from September, the start of the season, the first 4 games, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, completing 67% of his passes, 8.6 yards per attempt. The last 3 games since he came back from the injury, more interceptions than touchdown passes. Yards attempted have dipped to 6.1, just 58% completions. His passer rating is down 40 points, which is pretty astonishing.
Two touchdowns, 3 interceptions combined in his 3 games since he returned from the injury.
Yeah, his passing average 304 yards in the first 4 games to 192. Of course, cynical Tennessee fans and probably me to an extent are also like, well, he just hasn't played Tennessee's defense yet. So that could be the right thing. He's also not running as much. I think that's probably the big deal.
Yep.
Is quarterbacks like him, they've got to sort of they've maybe got to run and take a few hits to sort of get them in a groove. And then that's when it's really difficult. So I think if you're Tennessee, you've got to start this game well defensively. If you let a quarterback that can get hot early, we've seen that doesn't go well. But if you can get some stops early, keep the crowd bearing down on Oklahoma, maybe some of that doubt starts to creep in. We talked, kind of talked about it with Tennessee's defense. Is there the same thing on Tennessee's offense, right? Where, if Mateer goes out and you hit him early and they're not moving the ball and he makes a mistake, maybe that you can kind of keep them in that funk. But, if you give up a play or a touchdown drive early, that could get them sort of snapped out of it, get some confidence and get things in a groove. So the other thing with Oklahoma, this is by far going to be their biggest, most daunting road challenge. They played at Temple, which is not a road game really at all, the fact that it's in a different time zone. And they played the Cotton Bowl is a 50-50 split for that game with Texas. And then they played Williams-Brice, which is a tough place to play, but it's tougher not at that game was an early game, right? Noon?
I think so.
12:30, 12:45. And plus they jumped out early. And I can't imagine the South Carolina fan bases. They sounded pretty fired up last week against Alabama, but I can't imagine they've been super enjoying this season. So this will be a different animal for Oklahoma. And you mentioned, the Neyland at night factor. I think that's going to be a big thing. I just also think Josh Heupel's, he's just not going to want to lose to Oklahoma. I mean,
there's that too.
I don't know that he would admit it publicly, Ryan. And this is a little bit different now. Last season, he's going to Norman. Obviously, that was its own kind of thing. There were obviously a lot of emotions. His mom passed away earlier last year. So there was all that going around. I got to think, and again, I don't know if he would admit this publicly, but he got that one out of the way, the emotional return. And now it's that's just another team that I want to beat. And he probably wants to beat this team more than anybody else.
Yeah, I would imagine he doesn't ever really care to lose to Oklahoma as long as he's Tennessee's coach. But I think, and just again, the stakes for this team, I just think this team knows what's on the line. Oklahoma knows what's on the line. And to that point, Oklahoma's lost 2 of its last 3 games. I think they're coming in here with some, kind of nervous vibes, and they know what's ahead, and that's part of it too. Tennessee, they've got a couple tough games ahead, but this is one of them, and they don't have a team like Alabama ahead. Oklahoma, even if they get through this one, you got Alabama next, and that's a road game too, right? So you got to go to Alabama, and then you got Missouri and LSU down the stretch. So they've got at least a couple more games they could lose. So this feels like a fork in the road game to me for Oklahoma. They lose this one, I think they're staring 7-5 in the face, honestly, the way they've been playing lately. If they win this one, their playoff hopes are still alive. And even if you lose to Alabama, you could finish 9-3. You could at least have some better vibes going into the final few games. So this is a big spot. I don't know that Brent Venables is likely to get fired this year, but certainly there's going to be some heat on him if this season does take a downward turn over these final few weeks. And that's something they've got to be kind of watching for, is the season that got off to such a good start could end on a much different note if they don't take care of business in a game like this and find a way to pull what would be at least a mild upset on the road in a tough environment. So this is one where it's a toss-up game basically for both teams, ton on the line for each one. And I just think Tennessee's maybe in a better mental space going into this game. And then you've got the Josh Heupel motivation factor, which is definitely, it was a factor last year. Will they be able to go to the well on that every single year? I don't know, but certainly as players, I think are aware that he doesn't want to lose to Oklahoma.
Ryan, Tennessee is 1 commitment short now, and they've got a big recruiting list of visitors coming in. So briefly touch on Braylon Outlaw and give me 2 or 3 visiting recruits that we need to know about for this weekend.
Yeah, Braylon Outlaw decommitted from Tennessee on Wednesday after visiting Georgia Tech last weekend, and that one kind of got serious really quickly. He was at Georgia Tech for the Syracuse game on Saturday, and it sounded like coming out of that visit there was some real concern. Had some communication with Tennessee this week, and I think this is the type of situation we're going to see play out more and more in recruiting these days, where it's a program that's maybe not quite at the same level as Tennessee in terms of recruiting, at least, has the ability to, devote more resources to a player that Tennessee might want to keep, but at a certain point, you can't pay everybody at the same level, right? So each program is going to have similar resources in terms of revenue sharing, and that's just going to lead to some teams being able to put more money toward a certain player than you can justify. And so Braylon Outlaw is a good player, not someone Tennessee was looking to lose, but you've got a couple top 100 prospects at linebacker and TJ Wyatt and Braden Rouse. Can't keep them all, and so you can't do everything possible to save everyone in your class. And Georgia Tech just made a big push and has had a nice season that obviously has caught his attention, and so he ends up going elsewhere, and it looks like Georgia Tech is the favorite, at least right now, in that one. And then this weekend though, 3 official visitors among the unofficial visitors. 5-star class of 2027 running back David Gabriel George's back in town with his family and some extended family members as well for this one. So that's another big visit, even though he was just in town a few weeks ago. And the official visitors, you got a few guys that Tennessee is trying to flip from other schools. Micah Smith, the 4-star offensive lineman committed to UCLA. Amari Latimer, a 4-star running back committed to Wisconsin. Both of those guys have also visited other schools, and Ohio State's in the mix for both. Obviously UCLA, with its uncertainty, Micah Smith looking around. Wisconsin, shaky situation there with that staff. So Amari Latimer's been looking around. Ohio State looks like, maybe the team to beat for Latimer right now if he goes elsewhere, but Miami and others also in play. And then Luca Wolf, a tight end from Austria, who's at the NFL Academy in London, also taking an official visit to Tennessee this weekend. So that's one where he's committed to Cal. Probably going to come down to Cal and Tennessee in the end unless something changes. So certainly a big visit there as Tennessee looks to add a tight end to its 2026 class as well.
Got to unmute myself here. Great job, Ryan. We will have plenty of coverage, including a full visitor list, our picks on Friday, continued matchup breakdown of this Tennessee-Oklahoma game. Plenty of coverage coming your way on GoVols247 over the next couple days leading into kickoff on Saturday night at Neyland Stadium. For Ryan Callahan, I'm Patrick Brown. We'll talk to you guys here in a few days.